It's a lawyer and a financial advisor walk into a bar.
And then what happens, Dave?
Well, the question becomes, is renting an option that you can do for all your life?
Renting. So not buying a house at all because no one can afford a house anymore, apparently.
Well, is it, and this is probably the open to the interpretation of the discussion that we're going to have.
Yeah.
You know, you may, and this is where it's interesting, especially when we look at, we've got this huge intergenerational transfer that's occurring. And so some people are saying, you know, and there's a lot of discussion in the media around the bank of mum and dad to help kids. You know, you might have been, what was a $150,000 house is now, you know, $1.2 million house for someone to break into. Like it's, you know, it really is quite a difficult situation.
Yep.
But I think we need to kind of split part of that discussion. If you look at the European model, it's probably the complete opposite of what it is in Australia. So the majority of people in Europe rent their entire lives. Like it's never considered to be seen as, oh, don't you own a property? It's like, well, no, I just sort of kind of live in the city that I like to live in. But also their rules are very different. I mean, people might have a 10-year or there might be a 99-year lease on that property.
Right.
And you roll it forward. Whereas here it's all very, single year, then you got to roll it forward, and then the landlord's got a lot of options. And
and you might think out because they're going to buy, they've got to sell
all that stuff. And, you need authority to change.
You can't hammer a nail in the wall.
All that sort of stuff. So I think we need to split between, is renting an option for all your life? Well, the answer to that is tick. Yes, it is an option. However, there's got to be the other side of it that says, okay, if I do my numbers, the property that I want to live in and the suburb that I want to live in is going to cost me, and let's just use round numbers, $2 million to buy the house. Don't have that capacity in my current work environment, but I can afford to pay, $5,000 a month to rent that same house and live in it. Like, no problem. Happy to do that. Or it's even less, like depending on what it is. But what it comes back to is that on the cash flow that you're earning, you've still got to be parking some money to the side as an investment. And so it may mean that you may then purchase an apartment somewhere within Australia that puts you into the direct property market, but it's not in a property that you would ever live in yourself. You're purchasing it for someone else to live either in regional or in another, you know, city or town around the country. And so therefore you have your exposure to the real estate market, but not directly yourself. But a lot of it will be, but I just don't want to live. So you get all the tax advantages. So it's that rent vest. You know, you rent, but you invest elsewhere. And that becomes a mindset, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, the thing that strikes me is that often, you know, having your own house means you're sort of forced to save, if you like. And so that if you just rented, then sure, you might park your money in something else, but you might just spend it. And so, you know, often, although housing, I mean, is just as good as any investment, you know, just as good as the share market or anything else in general. But it's a way of kind of forced saving. It's a psychological thing more than anything. If you're just renting and then you've got that extra money in your pocket, you're reasonably likely to spend it. Whereas you've got this debt to pay off, you're reasonably likely to put the money in the debt. You know what I mean? So it's
it is. And that's why I say it's a mindset. And so part of it is these days that if you were going to make that as you know, you can run the numbers on it. I mean, that's a commercial decision that you end up doing. But if you're looking to then make sure that you don't just blow all the money that comes in, I've covered the rent and the rest is just party money. This is where it comes back to the discipline of sweeping funds out of your bank account across to an account. So therefore you've looked at your living expenses. And this comes back to potentially getting advice or just doing it directly yourself. For every 100 that comes in there, you know, 30% might go to your rent. 20% goes to your investment account and X of it. Like you change these percentages and then holidays and whatever it is. So you've then said, well, I'm doing that on that basis, but I do need to be building some investments outside of my, rent environment. But it also means, beauty, I don't have to own, so I'll go and rent a more expensive property than I probably can afford to rent.
Yes, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's no different than someone saying, well, I'm just going to buy a more expensive house because, you know, the interest rates are so much better and, look, I'll pick up my income. I mean, it's horses for courses, but
Yeah.
I don't see that as being a negative if you've got the discipline. And this, I say, there's a lot of technology out there that enables you to, sweep your bank account as a percentage that comes in. And the reason I talk about percentages is that if you are and your wage goes up, you don't want it to be a straight dollar figure. At least as a percentage, if your wage goes up, well, a greater percentage goes to your rent and, your investments or your holiday or your fund money account or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But it's automatically broken out. A bit like your automatic, if you're an employee, your superannuation is automatically taken from you. Like you don't even get to see it. It doesn't hit your bank account and then go to the super fund. Your employer pays a portion to you and a portion to the super fund. It's exactly the same concept that people need to, kind of get into that discipline. As I said, there's technology around for people to be able to do that. Like it's not, but it is discipline. There's an element of discipline, which is the same as saving money to buy a house and then getting a loan to purchase.
But this is really a discussion around saving rather than a discussion around investment per se.
Well, I think it's a bit of both. And it's, as I said, I mean, the European market is people don't even consider in certain places that they would ever purchase a house. They're like, no, we're really like, no one does that. Certain cities, it is majority owned by, a handful of people.
Yeah.
I mean, this is generational wealth that flows through. And people go, but that's just what everyone does. Everyone. Yeah. And that can also then start to evolve. And I do think it's something that will need to be looked at within the country around some of the tax advantages for people that are renting or I mean, now we're starting to get properties built that are, they're basically building them to be rented. Yes. Like they're not a development that is going to be on-sold. It is a development site, maybe an apartment block, and there might be 30 apartments in it. And every one of those is going to be owned. The whole block is owned by a business or an individual, and they will continue to rent that property out. It's never going to be sold. Like it's sold on that basis. And so people can then come into those properties on a longer term view rather than just a 1 year contract. I mean, because a lot of people would be quite comfortable to take a 5 or 10 year rental agreement on the basis that they know that they choose not to rent to purchase because they're living in a particular area that they like, and that might be because of schools or family or work. Yeah. But they would never own in that city or town.
Some of my clients have got children who are now getting to the point where they're looking at buying properties, and a lot of them have pressured their children to buy a property, and some of them are able to assist their children, some aren't, or in different ways. But there's often a lot, I think, in my kind of client's age bracket, if you like, they're often very keen on owning your own home and on real estate investment, and they're pushing it onto their kids, and their kids often are resisting that because home ownership's a lot more difficult for them. They're a lot younger. They want to have a more flexible lifestyle. They don't want to be stuck with a giant mortgage they can barely afford. And so there's a bit of tension between the kind of old-fashioned way of doing things. You're like, I mean, my mum has an Italian background, and she thought, everyone needs to be married and everyone needs a house. If you're married and have a house, you're set. Yeah, that's right. And of course, the answer is you've got to be married to the right person.
Good.
And you got to,
because that helps your job too, doesn't it, with your family law business?
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. By the way, we do family law. That's right. So I mean, life's a bit more complicated than that. But there is this kind of old-fashioned attitude, particularly in Australia, that you got to own your own house, you got to have real estate, otherwise you sort of can't get ahead in life. And what do the Europeans do with it? They don't own the whole cities of people who don't own the house. Are they buying shares? What are they doing with?
Yeah, a lot of them would then, and so they, again, this is where the mix becomes back to, and it's a bit like the attitude that people go, but property always goes up. Not always.
Yeah.
And there are definitely some tax advantages in negatively gearing, real estate. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that it's always the right decision. Yeah. And that's why I say sometimes it can be on the basis, and this is where you made the point previously about, the kids want to have some experiences. And so their argument is, but I can still live in the suburb that I want to live in.
Yeah.
I want to do travel experiences or just life experiences.
Yeah.
So I don't want to have that piece of real estate that I've got to constantly feel that I've got to be repaying the mortgage.
Yeah.
I want a bit of flexibility, and I think there will be that adjustment. But it does come back to increasing the amount that you then allocate to alternative investments. Now, as I said, part of that might be that you purchase another piece of real estate, but it's instead of having to spend $2 million, you might be able to find a piece of real estate that's, say $600,000, and it's an apartment that is in an area, and it may not be in the state that you live, that is comfortably rented to someone else. You can borrow X amount, and so therefore, and basically the rent is covering your mortgage expenses, so it's neutrally geared. So you've borrowed it, you've got some tax advantages, you had to save the money to get, part of the deposit. Then the property will go up in value. You potentially then will take it, go into a second property. And so you may then say, well, my preference is to have that flexibility. Or someone may say, I'll do more of my investments through the equity market because I don't have to worry about all the added concerns of the tenant ringing saying, oh, this is not working. And,
liquid, right?
So it comes back to a person's individual preference in a lot of areas, but it is definitely a mindset. And I do think part of it will start. It'll be interesting to see how we go in the next 10 years with this intergenerational transfer. Will the bank of mum and dad support people to get into a piece of real estate? And one of the other advantages in holding your principal place of residence in real estate is that it's capital gains free.
Yeah, that's huge, really.
So that is, and again, so this is where there's no perfect answer for anyone on an individual basis, but you are starting to see some family groups. I mean, we see some of them where they're starting to say to their kids, we will help you get into a piece of real estate, or they may have done that, they've worked away, they've gone to this next point, and then they'll say, well, we think you're better to upgrade your principal place of residence.
Yeah.
And by the way, we'll give you, $100,000, $1 million towards that, because all of a sudden they do have a substantial asset that is capital gains free that will continue to potentially go up. And if it's in do you know what I mean? So it really does become horses for courses around what some people want to do. And some people just, they prefer to have this flexibility of, I like to live here and, I want to then move every 12 or 18 months or 2 years because it's kind of fun, nice to go to a different area, nice to explore.
Absolutely.
You just kind of pick it up along the way.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of my clients, they're most of their wealth is in, one or two real estate assets.
Yep.
And it might be one of the assets is they're where their business is run from that they've managed to pay off over the years, which might have been not very desirable at the time they bought it, but it's very desirable now.
Yes.
And they've, so they've seen that success and then they want to push that success on their family. But often that it requires a huge sacrifice in lifestyle. For you might be living in some crappy place for many years,
correct,
and not going on a holiday every year and really grumpy about it. Whereas if you're renting, you might be able to move to the area you want to live, hang out with your friends, be close to your family, be close to good schools, be close to whatever it is that you want. And there's wealth in all of that, right? That's part
absolutely.
Of your life. Yeah.
And so this is, and it also then comes back to the capacity. When you are looking at alternatives, by just renting, okay, there's a monthly cost that goes out. But again, it comes back to the discipline of having other investments that complement that. Then either the investment strategy that you have generates an income that pays your rent.
Yeah.
So you may have a passive income stream and that basically pays your rent. So therefore your income coming in can be dealt with to be deployed to either to establish some further investments along the way.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, your investment portfolio, whatever that may be, direct real estate or even equities or a business, that can cover part of those expenses, that over time it just builds to a point that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't bother me that I don't have real estate, but it's also the capacity to be able to pull small amounts out. So sometimes you may have an investment in real estate, direct real estate, but you've got no way of pulling a 10 grand out from something if it's heavily geared.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to an equity portfolio, you might have a $200,000 equity portfolio and you've got an emergency that's occurred and you can pull 10 grand out if you need it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I know. And that's another reason that sometimes property works in that don't pull that money out even when you need it. So you can't sell your front door to because you've got a hospital bill to pay.
Correct. So I think it really does become. I mean, I think there's definitely going to be more and more discussion about it. One, we've got an extreme housing shortage. I've definitely heard some family groups saying, "Oh my God, my children, I can't get them. They're trying to find a place to rent in, closer to the university. I've got 3 or 4 kids. I think they're all probably going to go there. You know what? For the cost of me paying their rent or letting them live in college or whatever it is, yes, there's a net capital outlay, but I can borrow the money and it's costing me less to pay the mortgage if I purchase the property."
Yeah.
That they might then build as part of their, which again is an intergenerational transfer process. But they might say, well, I'll go buy, we're in Melbourne. So they might say, well, I'll go and buy a house in Carlton that, is 3 bedrooms and I get one child. Yeah, but you know what I mean? But for some people, I go, well, that's if I've sold something else or I've got the capacity because of my income, then I'll buy that. One child lives there and then rents the other 2 rooms out. Yeah. So then all of a sudden the other 2 rooms are paying for the mortgage.
Yeah, happy days.
Do you know? So there's a whole range of things, and is renting an option? For all your life. It really, in the end, it comes back to the individual. Like some people like the idea of just renting because they've got some flexibility and they don't have to take on the ownership of dealing with all the other stuff. Whereas other people, it's never an option for them. They would prefer to buy in an area that they don't really like living in, but they own that asset.
Yeah, well, when I look back, I bought a few times, and when I look back, and I felt the pressure to buy, so I bought, and I thought it was a sensible thing to do. But really, I spent quite a few years struggling away with very little cash, and really not being able to take advantage of opportunities in my life because I had no money, because I had spent all the money I had on the house, and I'm in the suburb I want to be in, but I can't afford to go across the street to a restaurant because I got no money. So what's the point of being in the
well, that's delayed gratification.
Yeah, well, and look, I'm happy I did now when I look back, I gave up a lot, and you sort of think, well, would I do the same again? And I don't think I would. I think I'd be much more comfortable renting, but you do feel the pressure, to buy.
It is hard because there is. Again, you said you've bought a few. We've bought a few houses over the years, and every time when you buy it, you think, oh, have I paid too much?
Painful,
and then sort of 10 years later when you go to sell it, you go, actually, that was a pretty good deal. We did really well out of that. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So it's a really, really difficult position. I don't think there is any perfect answer. Yeah. It is definitely, I do think going forward, the dialogue around the bank of mum and dad or the bank of grandma and grandpa is definitely increasing. Yeah. Because it is a very good way to, cascade assets down through generations, because there is a lot that can be done. You can support someone into a piece of real estate. The banks love it. So therefore from that then can be used as security for other investments or the starting of a business or, do you know what I mean? So it is, there's no doubt about it that it is a very strong way to pass wealth down to families. But it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah, well, and I think that the reality is some people, they're not going to be able to do that, and other people, other people they want to buy themselves or live their own lives, and so it's not always possible. I think where it is possible, it's pretty amazing, and the reality is it's sort of needed more and more just because of the way house prices are going. That regular people on regular incomes just can't buy houses anymore.
Well, even now, we've got interest rates that have gone up, which has now cut people's capacity. So, that. But again, we're probably normalising our interest rates back to what they probably should have been, and they were historically low So there's a whole range of reasons. And again, I think sometimes it is also readjusting people's expectations of perhaps where they could or should be living once they move out of home or work for go through uni and study and do this. They're like, well, why can't I live in that house that's kind of like mum and dad's? Yeah. Why do I need to buy this old place and spend all my weekends, ripping up carpets and painting walls.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, why can't I just walk into that $2 million house? Well, maybe you need to buy the $1 million house or the $800,000 house and spend $200,000 on a reno of a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
And get on the bus and travel further to work and all that stuff like people do, rather than living in the same suburb perhaps you grew up in. I mean, you're talking about from Carlton to Mooroolbark, or from South Yarra to the country, maybe to you move into the regional areas, although they're becoming more expensive, but only some of them. So,
but that's the other thing you look at. I mean, people will say, well, if I can work from home, am I better to, say, purchase a property that might be an hour or 2 hours out of Melbourne, as an example, or any really sort of major city? So I might live out there with the family, but we then have a small apartment in Melbourne that I travel to and spend maybe 2 nights a week in Melbourne.
Yep.
So I'm catching the train in and I'm coming from Bendigo, as an example. Catch the train down, work from home Monday, travel down Tuesday morning, work Tuesday, stay in Melbourne Tuesday night, work Wednesday, stay in Melbourne Wednesday night, work Thursday, catch the train home Thursday night. So I'm only in Melbourne 2 nights a week, but I've worked 3 days. But I've got the lifestyle. So I think there'll be some movements around that. Well, then people will say, actually, this is not a bad idea. Do I look at doing that for a period of time, which gives you the flexibility to rent, but also to assess where you may want to park and purchase. So instead of you purchasing over the years, we'll go and purchase the holiday house down the coast. They're saying, no, I'll make the holiday house my principal place of residence.
Yeah.
And then I might buy or rent a small apartment back in Melbourne.
Yep. Or there's even homestays now where, there's sort of like a hotel where you can, you can the short term sort of thing, but it's much cheaper than a hotel, but a bit more expensive than a normal rental, And so there's something in between if you're in town for, a month, a year, or 6 months, or whatever it is.
Yep. So I think this whole mindset around, you have to own.
Yeah.
And so therefore renting is an option.
Yeah.
But I qualify that with, but you've got to look outside to develop some appreciating assets.
Yeah.
I agree that if you are just paying money and renting, you've got to have some backup. You've got to be in a point, because that's always the objective, is to have basically paid off your house.
Yeah.
Or you've got other investments that service that income stream. You've got to get an income from somewhere.
Yes.
And so therefore over your lifetime, don't overindulge in your renting.
Yes.
To the detriment of building your external investment portfolio, and whether that be direct real estate, equities, cash, whatever it is, that's a determination that you've got to kind of pick up on.
Good one.
All right. Well, is there anything else you want to add, Alex, before we kind of wind up our final session?
No, that was great. Thank you. Renting's an option. Just make sure you save some cash and put it somewhere sensible.
All right. Well, as we close out our conversation today, I would like to thank Alex from Taurus Legal Management. He can be contacted via LinkedIn at Alex Martin or via the website tauruslawyers.com.au.
Thanks, Dave. And I'd like to thank David Murdoch, the wealth activist from Paxton Bridge. You can contact him at David Murdoch on LinkedIn or at www.paxtonbridge.com.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. Enjoy. Good talking. And we'll chat again soon.
See you next time.